just press the button, I keep going, or do you want to recap?
It just, yeah, we'll recap.
Okay, hit it.
You're listening to the Vox from your buddy.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we were just talking about was a conversation a Voxer was having with a friend of mine, a friend I think of many people, Daniel Schmachtenberger, and he was talking about his. I think this is okay to share. In fact, I think it's probably good. Of a sense of repentance around using language like inexorably self-terminating and necessary and sufficient conditions. And I think the essence of it was something like the implication, the frame necessary for that language to even be said is a frame of engineering, of design, of control, of completeness, of complicatedness in relationship with reality. And he referenced E.O. Wilson that complexity with reductionism is science, and complexity without reductionism is art. And to say that to come with a frame that is science that's going to get us out of this is already error, right? That's not the way we're going to get out of it. Science has a role to play, and it has a role to play held by, in some sense, in service to art. And then I responded. I said, "Hey, this reminds me of something that I found myself saying, which was at about that same time, actually, which was every time I look at this thing and I think about it, I'm absolutely certain we're fucked. But then I noticed that there's something bigger than I thinking about it that is reminding me that that doesn't matter. That projection of possibility is not even the way that you go about guiding your choices anyway. And find out what the right thing is and do it. That's your mandate. And if it turns out that en route we all end up dying, then that was the best choice in that context anyway. And if it turns out that that's the thing that allows you to discover the mystery that you couldn't perceive, that was how we actually make our way through it, then that's the way you're supposed to have done it anyway. So it's like if I feel it with my heart or with my soul or with my wholeness, I'm like, yeah, of course, this is actually a very easy thing. Just take the next step, open, fully, joyfully, and notice. Yeah, thanks, mind. From everything we're fucked. Yep, got it.
Joe, what do you? And I'm kind of asking you, not necessarily what you think, but what you meant in the moment that you said it, which is different. It struck me. Even if we end up dying, that's okay. It's for the best. What is it that's present such that allows you to think that and you were making this distinction?
Yeah. Okay. So it's, this is really, the way you put it makes it very subtle, right? Because what was present, not what do I think about it? And that distinction is the distinction. So it's like when one is, in this case, when I was, but even right now, when I simply am. To make it easier, let's just do it right now, because the same thing is present. When I am coming from a place. It is the questions of what happens next in that sense of wanting to control the future, in particular, not wanting to die, like very concretely. But also like not wanting bad things to happen, like literally imagining possible futures and wanting to control what they're like. Right? When this one is coming from a particular place, those kinds of questions don't arise. They're just not part of the story. They're just not the nature of that place from which this one comes. When I, to make it very precise, when I come from a different place, those are the questions. And when the answers to those questions look rough, then I can find myself quite daunted. But when this one comes from that other place, they aren't even relevant questions. That's the key. Like that's the essence of it. They're like, that's an interesting way to look at it. I'm not sure why you would. It feels like a weird way to do it, but okay.
So is it, would if we're just kind of extending this out, stretching it along a little bit, like in that sense of what Daniel was feeling repentance about, right, was this operational kind of engineering Minding.
Sensibility.
Yeah, sensibility.
Yeah, minding. Yeah.
Right. I think that's something. I think that can be seen or experienced or revealed as a, let's see, a straying of some sort that you can then notice, right? Like, so that's the thing I appreciated about that he's repenting, right? Because right, because he's tuned into something such that when he strayed from it, he noticed.
Yeah, that's right. He noticed in a way that language itself is repenting.
Yeah. So language
not
itself,
error correcting.
yes. Right.
Not like I was wrong and now I'm right.
Right.
That's different. Repentance is not that.
Yeah.
Repentance is actually, I was in the mode where wrong and right was the mode of inquiry. Right. And now I have learned how to loosen that mode. Like it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah. Because I've just been thinking, I mean, what's coming to mind right now is, this is a book I've been diving into. It's Ivo Di Janeiro, who's he's a Heideggerian scholar. In the deepest sense, a philosopher. I don't know if I would love Heidegger, but I like what Heidegger has me look at. Right.
That's a fair distinction.
Yeah, but the
I'll put my mid-century Germanic glasses on so people how's all right.
Very good. Is he's making this distinction about that everything in science, and this kind of plays into it, like everything in science, from its methods, all of its operational concepts, and he makes this distinction between an operational concept and an ontological concept, right? And he says that, like, if you look at science in some sense is operationalized, right? These metaphysical distinctions. And that in some sense, he doesn't really say this. I don't know if he'd say this. This is what I got, is in some sense, philosophy or the task of thought, in some sense, needs to take those back over because they die and become, right, unrevealing, if you will, and kind of self-evident and unchecked. So I see the hint of this, right, in his repentance, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's very nicely put. You're reminding me of this conversation I had long ago. I thought it was beautiful. Do you mind if I tell the story?
Oh, please.
So I was at the Santa Fe Institute, and I was sitting next to some, very esteemed mathematician, an older gentleman, so probably an emeritus esteemed mathematician. And I had just recently been, to be frank, struggling with, but you'll get it in a second, struggling with the proposition that dot 999 repeating equals 1. I don't know how it came into my mind. Somebody somewhere, expressed it, and I was like looking at it, going, I can run the proof. Like I get it. I understand like the graduate school proof of how that works. But there's something about it that feels completely wrong, like deeply fundamentally wrong. That's interesting. By the way, just think about in that languaging the tension between those two modes. The point is, in fact, precisely the modes are the point. There is a mode that is a mode where to operate in that mode at all, 0.999 equals 1. But that's not the whole universe. That's not all of reality. There are other modes within which one can operate. And there is another mode in which 0.999 seriously doesn't equal 1. I didn't have that language at the time. But what I could do is I could analytically critique the proof. Like, okay, well, these proofs make a whole bunch of assumptions. Why are those assumptions valid? Like what's going on? Of course, which is a sort of a little bit of a Gurdanian move. So I'm sitting next to this guy and like, hey, by the way, it seems like maybe it's an odd question, but that whole 0.999 equals 1 thing doesn't seem right to me. So, reactively, being an esteemed emeritus mathematician and probably professor of mathematics, he gave me the orthodoxy. He gave me the ordinary proof. And I was like, well, I hear you. And these critiques, by the way, at this point, I can't remember what they were, but these critiques. And it was really beautiful. And then he sits there for like 15 minutes, dead silent. Like that's how you know you're dealing with a thinker, like a mathematician. It's like, hold on. And then he goes, if you want to do math with numbers, then .999 repeating equals 1. And when he said that, I was like, boop, oh, okay, great. Yeah, that's true. Right? Which is the point is, if you want to operationalize, and if you want this thing to be functional and useful in doing things like science and technology, then this is the axiom that you apply. That's the mode, that's the world that you're in. If that's not your thing, if that's not what you're looking for, then you're right.
Wow.
There's an equivalence there.
Wow. I mean, I first of all, I really appreciated what you said, that dead silence. And he goes all the way down and makes that distinction, those two modes, right? Of where you're coming from.
If you want to do math with numbers. I'm not sure if he was actually making the distinction of the two modes.
Yeah.
But he was acknowledging the possibility.
Right. But that story distinguishes or makes distinct those two modes at least in this nervous system over here.
Right. Okay, cool. Oh. Now the question is, what other modes are there? Like, what else might you do with numbers besides do math?
Well, there's also like that which is moding, right?
Keep going.
See, there's something about that. Yeah, there's these modes, right? But what is it that modes? And it seems like whatever it is that modes is whatever it is that has one stand back and come from a place, right? It's something about that lifting of that which goes into modes, right? And in such a way that a mode in a different mode, well, like for example, like a mood is like a mode in some sense, right? You wake up in a mood, and the mood, when you're in a mood, man, it changes the whole world. You're in a different world when you're in a different mood, right? And so
shifting moods is a whole thing.
Yeah. Worlds like a country can have a mood, right? And they can become very, very stable. But they seem to give, like, moods are these things that, how I would put it is, whenever you say like it seems this way, the seeming, like the way things seems to be something to do with what gives that is the mood that something is in, right? And it's the hardest thing to point to, right? So so there's this kind of way in which a mode is a completely different world, right? Between modes. So I'm just wondering about what is that more of that primal ground, I guess, if you'll say, such that then expresses itself, arises as moding.
Well, Spinoza would call that God. Different folks are going to name it different things, but you're going to have to get real deep, real fast, because as you say, mode is very fundamental.
Yeah, totally.
It's
God is another name for concealed. On some level, right?
Concealed is one of the million names of God, I think, is right. the more orthodox way of saying it.
Right, totally. And
revealed, by the way, is another name.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. But it seems like whatever that is, there is this element of it's concealing, in that you hit it, right? And you bounce out it. And if you question it, it starts to loop in around itself. Those kinds of, that turning is usually where I think a lot of people just go, they bounce off. But my sense is like that you hit those things, those turnings is you've entered a new domain, if you will, right? You've entered a mode where you're getting close to something that's in some senses presupposed, it's kind of concealed in its obviousness. It's what's silent, goes silent in the conversation, right?
For me, in this conversation, what I usually find myself doing is just reflecting on Forrest Landry's work, particularly the very beginning of the immanent metaphysics, because it's where the clearest and, from my point of view, deepest namingness, and possibly also concealingness has shown up. So you have one name might be mystery or concealed, and one name might be naming or names or revealed. And the third would be the relationship between, which is important. And as you said, and that's what you were just describing, right? You were describing the kind of the source, the creative principle, the mystery, the matrix, the the unnameable, the Tao, like that mode, which would be, in this case, Forrest specifically called that formally in his language, the transcendent. And then you were talking about how there's a process, a relationship with that. And there's a relationship whereby there is a revealing, and a naming, a domaining, a worlding, and then there's a process whereby that world brings one into relationship versus relationship from and relationship to, and that itself has its own qualities. That's I mean, to be very frank, the strongest, clearest, most both robust and nutritive way of thinking, talking, and living about this set of questions that I've personally encountered.
Right.
Although Spinoza, which was my first perspective on this, which was a long time ago,
How long ago was that? How long ago was that?
I was introduced to Nietzsche by a girl, as many I think were, which is why I spent the time wrestling with him, because of the other stuff. And then Nietzsche introduced me to Gilles Deleuze and to Spinoza. But then Deleuze introduced me back to Spinoza. So I found myself
because he wrote a
in
book on Spinoza.
Yeah. So I found myself in this sort of love triangle where both Nietzsche and Deleuze kept pointing to Spinoza. So I guess I must have been 21.
Do you remember what Deleuze says about? I haven't read that book, but I saw it recently. I was like, that seems like a one to dive into.
Which one? Practical philosophy, or
it's one where he mentions Spinoza in the title, I think.
Yeah, so it's called Spinoza: Practical Philosophy.
Yeah.
What did he say?
Yeah, like what is Deleuze? Of course, Deleuze is very difficult to summarize.
Yeah. Well, in this case, what he's doing in this particular series, he did one on Bergson, he did one on Nietzsche, he did one on Leibniz, is he's kind of like, maybe one way of putting it, he's sort of gobbling them up, like fully metabolizing, and then shitting them back out and showing you. Right. So it's not, he isn't even pretending that this is Spinoza. What he's saying is, Gilles Deleuze, was inspired by this. It's transformed me. And so my gift back is to transform it in expressing it back out to you. Right. So that's first and foremost. But the book is not very big, and it's essentially, in some sense, him saying, "This is what I think Spinoza is saying." So it's a retelling of the Spinoza story through the Deleuzian, whatever you want to call it, lens, I suppose, but it's more of a kaleidoscope. So lots of things, obviously, because it's the whole story. But one of the things that I think, maybe two things actually. One is a retelling of the story of sin. Through the language of conatus, an encounter.
Right. Conatus, encounter.
So the idea is that there is it's funny, the modes, the ontological primitive of conatus, which we would say is, like, in some sense, soul, was another way of thinking about it, or even a more complex entity of which soul is one aspect, from Spinoza's perspective. And then the ethics, right? Because remember, Spinoza wrote the ethics. That's his thing. Right? He's not really, he's like talking about how do we make effective choices in life, which is why he and Forrest have so much in common. He's like not into trying to tell a narrative about what's up. Although, of course, to get where he's getting, he does that. But his point is to say, how do we make effective choices? And he talks about encounters between conatus, like what's a joyful encounter? What's the sad encounter? Like joy and sadness as qualities of relationality, like the felt sense of decline, or the felt sense of uplift, or not even uplift, but of richness, like joy. Because joy and grief are very much in the same hold hands, but an expansion of quality of capacity to live in world. Right? That's a joyful encounter, which is to say an expansion of conatus, which is for me, what I do is I imagine a sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And, to make it fun, let's imagine first and foremost, it's a sphere that is it's a pearl.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of like a pearl. But if you look at it really closely, it has the potential to be opalescent, like an opal.
Yeah.
Right? And prismatic. Okay.
Yeah.
Now imagine that what happens is that you grab it by its exterior and you pull it. So you expand its volume, you make it bigger.
Yeah.
And in the act of doing that, though, there's something that fills the interior. Like I'm actually not decreasing the pressure. Like if I were blowing up or trying to pull a balloon, there's something that's coming into it.
Yeah.
And that coming into it is coming in from the micro level, from the transcendent.
It's like a diaphragm, right?
Potential.
The diaphragm works like that too, right?
Well, the diaphragm, exactly, it inhales. The diaphragm expands the lungs. And so expanding, something has to come in this case, air, right, from the outside.
Yes.
In the context of a sphere, there is no outside. So it has to come in from its own sort of intrinsic connection with an outside that is inside.
It has to already be in a relation such that it knows to go like this. Otherwise, it wouldn't go like this. So it's already, in some sense, seems to be a feature of the diaphragm or of this, right? That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like let me think. What's a visual metaphor? You must have seen volcanic rock. How it's like a block, but it's like porous.
Porous, yes.
Yeah. So imagine that this is such a weird. It's impossible to actually truly. Well, okay. I'll say it in a completely different language.
Right.
Quantum, the quantum foam.
Okay, right? Great. Quantum foam.
So if I
we're just a few minutes into.
If I take universe, think about like the story of the Big Bang. If I take universe and I make it bigger, right, I can do one of two things. I can either stretch the things that are in it out, or I can manifest more reality from the quantum. So that it actually is still fully full, because it was literally able to create more reality. In the context of getting bigger. So think about universe as being that pearl, okay? Conatus, your own pearl, right? Your sovereignty in the language I use, in a joyful encounter does that, right? This is a joyful encounter, is a transformation of self that literally grows reality. It expands what is real in universe in a joyful encounter. And you are more full while also being moreness. Yeah, so that's at least I think I took that away from Deleuze, from Spinoza 30 years ago.
what I'm hearing is that there are probably some modes which modes, right, that ground, there's probably modes that do this to the ground. They draw from the ground versus draw from something finite or, right, in a possessive kind of way. They draw in that mystery, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we would call things like connected to source or creativity, or I suppose generative. That feels a little bit weird. This is some of the language also that Johnny V and I have been talking about in the mode of the sacred. Is I think also connected to that same sensibility. And this mode of the profane is even more specifically the cleaving of that, the cutting off of that. And then an exploration of now what is basically essentially a dead or bounded finite, which is it's easier to deal with because it's now bound in some way. You can find the edges, you can begin to find its shape and characteristics and explore it, but precisely because it is now closed and strict, second law of thermodynamics, it's going to be exhausted at some point. Right? Effectively, it's a closed system, so it's going to go to equilibrium. It's going to die.
Right.
So that would be the profane, is that exact action.
What Daniel may have noticed.
Oof. Yeah. Exactly. What is the other thing there? Hold on. Well, there's a lot of other things. Let me shift. So some of the other things that I'll say I notice when I have that same, or what I would imagine is that same recognition,
Mhm.
is the egoic content. To say, to language something as necessary and sufficient, or
Mhm.
inexorably self-terminating,
Mhm.
bizarrely enough,
Mhm.
implies, imports, and here I doesn't necessarily mean this I, but there is an I, an ego, will solve that problem. Right? It is a problem to be solved. It is a puzzle to be puzzled. It is a finite domain to be explored, mapped, and completed. Yeah?
Mhm.
And there is a challenge to construct the adequate I, the collective intelligence, if you prefer. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter which I it is, to construct a finite search algorithm that has the capacity to, in fact, discover the answer to the puzzle. Right? So all of that is actually implied. It is intrinsic to the frame, and
Yeah.
includes all
Right.
of it. Yeah. So
Right.
when you hit any of those wires and you notice the degree to which that whole frame is modally wrong, right? You should say the
Yeah.
moding. Who is the one that's noticing this, and how does one
Yeah.
notice in
Yeah.
that inquiry?
Yeah.
Then you have a bit of a reaction, like a whoa, hold on. And if you
Right.
have built any awareness or skillfulness or habits
Yeah.
around that kind of a reaction, you're like, oh, I repent.
Right. Right. Totally. So interesting. Because it's interesting, like a frame, the frame works by withdrawing, right? It's like it, in some sense, it's interesting if you go back on it. It's like a frame only operates as a frame by it not being what's in the frame, but
Yeah, well,
actually, right? And
that's the
so,
omniscient mood.
yeah. So
So
that's,
when Forrest talks about the omniscient mode,
uh-huh.
the omniscient mode is precisely that, right? To withdraw, like looking at a photograph.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not in it. I'm omniscient, meaning I have a view of the whole thing. Well, the only way to have a view of the whole thing is to get out of the thing,
Yeah.
third person it, and
Yeah.
look at it, right? To make it an objective
Right.
that I can perceive.
Yes.
And so as you say, exactly, that is the move, that is the frame.
Right. And so there's something about it takes, I think one of the things that were a lot of these conversations that we've been having are circling around, right? In the circumambulating sense. It's precisely like, in some way, the question is something like this: how is it that we can be present to context without making it a context, yet still, in some sense, allowing it to shine forth? In fact, these conversations very much, Dialogos is very much about this. It has this quality of it's aspirationally trying to, in some sense, through saying, presence the unsayable, right? Without still conforming to its unsayability, yet showing it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To make space.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And here the making matters, even in the making of the space, right? The way we make space, or it makes space. Like in that, yeah. Because there's one of the things about this I've noticed in these dialogues, and dialogues like this that have this go into this mode, right? Is it's in some sense where we start to talk about things, right? And in saying it, there's a way where kind of in some sense the gravity, the unsaid slips away. It slips away out of the end, but the saying it reveals it, right? In some way, right? And then it starts to actually take the presence of the conversation, right? And it turns out in retrospect afterwards, as John would say, we conform, we walk away and we're like, whoa, I feel different because we've just been conforming to it, right?
Yeah. It's funny, as you were right at the tail end there, the name I attached with that is actually Benita. She very explicitly said, in collective insight practice, we will find ourselves in a shared space. But none of us will walk away with the space. We will walk away transformed ourselves.
Yeah. Find ourselves.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's a nice thing. So what are some things that are happening there? I was, endeavoring to be in that space with you and listening to how what you were describing was happening in the context. Tricky. Let me see. Wow. Okay. Yeah. What I'm seeing / feeling is like the inversion of music. How do you say this?
As you're talking about it, just my heart is opening.
All right, let's go with cage, right? Let's go with silence. All right. The presencing of silence, the noticing of the presencing of silence. And then the recognition that, this is so hard. What I'm imagining is, let me make it really easy. Let me take one string. Okay, I have an instrument. It's one string. Boom, like that, one string. Now, what I want you to do, as I want you to take, okay, this is, I can get there. Check this out. All right, got my instrument. It's like a little bow, one string.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to put it in water. And then I'm going to freeze the water. And then I'm going to snap my fingers and the instrument disappears. It dissolves. So now it's negative space.
So put it in the water, and you're going to freeze the water. Right.
Yep. So now I have water containing an emptiness that is in the shape of the instrument.
Yeah. Okay? Yes.
Now what I want to do is I want to imagine the possibility that I can allow the water can become fluid, but without becoming so fluid that it loses the shape. It's not ice anymore. It's something else. It's the universe. Now what's going to happen is the universe is going to move in the vibrational frequency that represents the inversion or the converse, I think it probably is, of the string moving. So that if I wanted to, I could blink my eyes real fast and I could see a string moving. But what's really happening is the universe is actually fluctuating in a particular frequency. And that is the stringness, right? I don't know.
Oh, whoa.
So that's the thing that I was trying to articulate is that, right? That's the negative space.
By the way, did you just put that together just now?
Yeah, just now. Or to be more precise, I became the string, and then I went through an inversion process to become the universe playing the string.
Yes.
To be able to express that. That's what happened.
The inversion. Wow.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I was noticing, it's funny, like I was noticing a curiosity. Like, I don't know where that comes from or what it looked like. There's a curiosity. I cannot say that I was curious, but rather a curiosity provoked or inquired. I wonder if you can do both at the same time. I wonder if you can be the universe playing the string and the string being played by the universe simultaneously. And the answer is yes, by the way, but it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's like, the curiosity emerged, and then something in this one, like, just find out. Right. I was able to hold that place for just a moment and notice there's something that happens there as well.
Well, okay, so let's maybe if we brought it, let's look at moments. Let's look at a possible moment where that was happening, right? And it's striking me because I've been thinking about, I've been reading a lot, like exploring a lot more of the Middle Ages, right? And the Middle Ages aren't really Middle Ages. Like it's actually a lot more, they're not the Dark Ages, right? But in some sense, there's a coherence in the Middle Ages that is just almost unprecedented, right? So like if you think about like the Middle Age town, in fact, even I mean, this isn't Middle Ages, but even when you go out east, there's the older towns on the East Coast, right? The really old ones, the 1700s. If you stand back and you look at, in every one of them, the highest point of the town is the cross.
Yeah.
Right. And then everything about the town, from where the church is to how the streets are laid out, right, is the cross is always above you, and there's a town center, and everything is, in some sense, architecture is, in some sense, presencing the context, right, that in the inexhaustible, in the particular, in the most structured, right? And so that as you walk along, if you imagine growing up in that, you don't even have to believe anything. You just have to, and you have to walk inside of its intelligibility, and it's all, in some sense, laid out like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I think I get so existentially nauseous when I go to a subdivision, right? Because in some strange way, a subdivision, right, is built to look like that. So it's built to look like a house. It's built, so in some sense, it announces its vacuity, its absence to that ground. And so you just end up in this, right?
It announces its profanity.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So in some sense, I would imagine architecture, like and buildings, it can actually do that in some sense, right?
Crucially.
Yeah.
The thing I've really been feeling enormously over the past few months is the in the context of civium.
Yeah.
The specificity, frankly, of how.
By the way, I haven't even started those videos, by the way, because I've been wanting to wait until I can just really sit down and listen to that. So I've held off from watching those. Yes.
I cannot say that they were worth that amount of intent, but
okay.
Each his own. I can't even say that they're even worth watching. But if it turns out that you choose to attend them in that way and they show you something that feels like it was worth the time, I'm glad that's the case.
Yes, thank you. I'll let you know.
Let me see. Sacred. Yeah. The sacred relationship with the land. Sacred relationship with the whole place. Yes. This is the key, right? If you think about it, if I really, really want to do this right, the cross has to extend all the way to the actually transcendent. And then has to be grounded in the fully immanent, right? In the actual, in the place itself in all of its ways, right? So it's the, check this out. The way what you're describing it, there's a felt sense of rightness, the primary guide of how one goes about cultivating an architecture with that sensibility. Right? Yeah. You put the brick down, and you really need to feel that the brick is in the right place, like integrity. And you look around, maybe even like listen to the sound of brick on brick, the way it sounds in the street, like every aspect of the entire quality of experience is orienting your capacity to choose the specificity of the materialization of, right? That's how you do it.
It's like an optimal grip on multiple dimensions at the same time, all right there. Yeah.
And that's the indigenous. Like when you read Tyson Yunkaporto talking about what it means to be an indigenous human in custodial relationship with nature, and which, by the way, in a migratory, right, is to really feel and listen and perceive, like, and the wind is changing, and the birds are singing a different kind of song, and the warmth of my skin is shifting, which means therefore my movement and motion and my part of this story is now called forth in a particular way, right? That's what I'm talking about, which is to say, truly sacred, like really deeply imbibing and expressing the sacred moment to moment in relationship to the whole of world, right? Well, that's actually pretty much all enough by itself. But once you've done that, right? Once you've kind of said, okay, that's what I'm trying to do, myself and with others. Then there's a listening to and a calling forth. Is now the architecture is the co-creation with these, right? Anthropos, human, right? Is handed one, right? With these, to begin the thing of giving our capacity and our co-creative capacity to cultivate in relationship with the place, the land, the nature that we are at, an expression, a sacred expression. Right? So if you think of all architecture must be a sacred expression, then what happens is, as you say, as you're moving through it, if you're moving through architecture that was intended to be and skillfully delivered as a sacred expression, you will feel that. And of course, now what happens is you're lit up qualitatively. Like all kinds of new things will begin to show up. Like you'll actually notice that the light reveals different aspects of beauty and inquiry as it shifts, as the sun shifts through the day and through the seasons. And I don't mean simulation. I don't mean, well, that's a cool idea. Let me figure out how to calculate that and drop it. No. As a natural thing that happens when you really
every step on that rock that was laid down, your bodily comportment is,
like, well, how did that happen? You're like, because it's there, and I listened, like that kind of an answer.
It's there,
and so then you get the cycle, right? Because now what happens is to be born in that context, right? To be developed from conception in that context, your body and your soul are receiving that quality, that complexity every instant. And so you are now becoming an instrument whose capacity to receive and attune to what I guess Greg calls wisdom energy, right? Like that verticality it's well trained, right? It's actually just, it's nice. It's well held. And therefore your capacity to give that back, to use that listening, and then to be able to be in a deeper, stronger, more skillful, sacred relationship is better. Let me just, what I'm saying here, there's a lot, but the thing that is popping up here is to say, look, you remember back in the day, I think before we were born, there's this whole brouhaha around the X minute mile. I don't know what it was, 4 minute mile or something like that. Like literally, maybe impossible. Maybe human beings' bodies will fly apart if we try to run faster than this speed. Right? One guy, by the way, in the West, like I don't know, I'm sure there are people all over the world who've done it many times. So one guy in the West, in sort of historical frame, pulls it off and runs faster. But nowadays, like an average high school sprinter can break that speed.
Right.
This is the thing. Like we can the first generation, our generation, working from mostly having to heal to be able to listen to this at all, can only try to move the story forward and create less noise for our children and our children's children. But in 2 or 3 or 4 generations, if we are able to hold the integrity of that and continue to move in that as the mode of manifestation, mode of being and doing in world with world, then wow, those kids will be pretty fast.
Yes. Just letting that land. One of the things I've noticed, I think actually kind of referencing the architecture, context, presencing, just to recap, just where we started from, which is, what is that Daniel was in relationship to, such that, right, he could repent from, right, modes. What is that which modes? Mystery. Then the different mode, the mode of before the repentance, let's say, right? Enframing, grasping, mapping, enclosing. Yet then that background or that ground, which goes into that mode, in some sense, it's both background, but it's in view that would even have you go into that mode in the first place on some level. But once it starts, it becomes background, right? Confusion of the map and the territory, right? All of those kinds of things as it becomes forgotten, right? And then repeats that forgetting. And then we went to, this fun, going on that ride. This is where my dyslexia comes in handy, just reverse it. then
Yeah.
yeah.
You and Zach.
And then the question like we left is basically then that mode, which is the embodiment of the sacred, right? And tending to that mode versus, well, I don't want to say versus right now, but versus this mode, right? I asked this question, how do we allow the context of the infinite, of the ground, of whatever it is that God, allow that to become present in our mode, right? As the context without turning it into a content, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you had that beautiful analogy of the one of the cello or the what was it? What was the
It
instrument?
was a bow. It was a cello with only one string.
Yeah, a cello with one string. Freeze it.
Because like I couldn't figure out how to play any more notes than one.
Yeah.
That's why I had to do one string.
Exactly.
Like, oh man,
Totally.
play 4 notes on this thing.
Totally. Have that disappear, liquefy the water a little bit, but where it still holds that, invert it, and feel the vibration of that go through and then you were talking about like, then you asked yourself this question, right? Which was, now I'm wondering, right? What was that? I'm wondering, can I invert it? Something about, what was it?
Simultaneously.
Yeah, simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, okay. I think
that's the answer to your question. That's the thing that you were just asking.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's the thing you were just asking. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
And then basically, can you hold
right
the it's right relationship is the phrase that comes up, right?
Yeah.
This is that tension.
The participants, and it's precisely our attention, right? If we think about, just to bring in, I mean, it seems like if anything, human being dwells in between being and appearance, right? Like, so it just seems to be where we live, or participation and individuation, right? And we are that tension, right? So this is the central thing about being human. This is the consideration about being human, is like, how do we be in a mode that's authentic, which is on some level like connected to the one, while dealing with the many, and then creating a mode that seems to be strikes me as the question for us, the most personal one, the most universal one, the most cultural one. Yes, the most practical one, right?
If you don't do that right, then every step you take is in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Yes.
And the more you convince yourself that you don't have time to do that right, or that it's too important to slow down to do that right, the bigger steps you're taking in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And if you get frustrated with how hard it is to do that right, the harder it is to do that. I mean, it's the most practical, the most subtle. And as you were weaving just then, right? Yarning, as
yes,
as would say.
Yes.
I was hearing Johnny V's distinction between the imaginary and the imaginal.
Yeah, bingo.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a thing for us to be doing here. And we're a part of nature, but we're not the same as everything else. Like we have this thing that's what we're here for. That's what we're about. It's the imaginal capacity to intentionally, to consciously grow the real. Wow, that's intense.
Grow the
real.
That's
a serious deal, right?
Yeah.
Intentionally, to consciously grow the real is our gig.
Yeah.
And of course, a sacred trust, because if you pop that out of the imaginal, which is to say just continuity of contact, right? Holding the whole and being very careful to grow the real in a way that has integrity, with integrity and from integrity and to integrity.
Mm-hmm.
If you pop into the imaginary, right, then you've alienated yourself from the real, and you are for sure walk further and further away from the integrity of yourself and the real. Meaning you yourself will lose integrity. You'll be living more and more in a fantasy land that isn't real. So you will be divided in yourself, in your own interior.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be divided with reality, right? You'll be fighting it with delusional and bullshitting and trying to do that stuff. Yeah. And you'll actually be breaking the integrity of the real, right? You'll be throwing pollution and toxicity and whatever into your environment, whatever it is. Right? It could be lies and advertising and marketing. It could be beating up your children's souls. It could be anything, right? But that's sin. Back to Spinoza, right? Those are the three flavors of sin. Error in the language. Sin just means to be off the path, to walk that way when that was the way you should be going. Yeah. And those are the three.
Right. I'm appreciating the sense in which even it even shows up in our air, right? It's even there that is oriented to this. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Like even our falling astray is a falling from, and in that sense is present in the character of falling. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so there's something about that primordiality that kind of points to everything. Right. Even
yeah.
Right. And in
fact, it's beautiful. But I just heard a beautiful, like a musician.
Yeah.
So beautiful, like a musician, beautiful. And then a bad note.
Yep.
But the musician is holding something where the bad note becomes the most beautiful of the notes. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're really, if the musician is like, bang, and, sorry guys, it just like drops out of the whole thing. Bad note, right? But if you just plan, and the bad note is just in it, right? The awakening of that, degree to which that's an absolution, and that is a repentance embodied. Like, that's how this thing works, man. You do fall. We're humans. It's what we do. We fall. It's part of our story is to fall, is to err, and to breathe in the learning that is intrinsic in the air. I mean, how else are you going to learn? And then to get back onto the path, because we have now learned something even harder earned.
Right. This is why it seems like always never a bad move to always ask what's unsaid, right? What am I not hearing? Like, it seems like those questions are never bad to ask, right? Have you noticed that? Well, they're confronting.
It's like it should be like written on the back of your hand.
Yeah, totally. What am I not hearing? What am I not listening to? What's the silent note, right?
Yeah.
Funny. It's never not. Yeah, it's funny. It's never bad, but boy, I have to say, like, it definitely is confronting. It can definitely.
It's like note to self. The universe is really super big, and mystery abounds, and it's very likely you're missing something.
Yes.
Just... Or the other one. This is more than have you noticed that you fuck up a lot? Just remember that.
Yes,
it's just don't stop trying stuff, but just remember you're probably fucking it up.
Totally.
And how do you deal with that? Listen,
totally.
Just ask yourself.
Absolutely. And the asymptotic nature of it, right? Not only are we always fucking up, but we can't ever totally finalize it in some sense. We're always can get closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, right?
Well, what I was just seeing there is that great video of the Mandelbrot set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're in fact, they are in fact actually zooming in, but we begin to realize the notion of closer and the notion of zoom is actually not meaningful in the context of something that's intrinsically infinite.
Yeah.
You're just journeying, right? You're journeying with some other kind of relationship to what it means to move. Like, what does it even mean to move in the context? This is wow, sorry. I got to beat this drum because it came up for me so strongly about 10 years ago. It was the phrase like the error of Leibniz. Have I said this before to you?
No. Oh, wait a minute. No, this is I think you have actually. Remind me.
Pretty sure in the hyper conversation I've said it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
But the notion is that there's just a distinction It's back to math with numbers. Like, it's the same idea. Leibniz makes the error. He makes the awesome discovery that you can take the construct of the limit as x approaches infinity and use it in replace of infinity. Right? So you can, that's the awesome discovery, right? This allows us to do calculus. It's a really useful tool. If I want to use do math with numbers, I can now do a lot more. Awesome. He makes the error, and I'm not sure he makes the error, but we following him have found ourselves in the error of then now xing out infinity and taking the limit as x approaches infinity as actually being equivalent to, like equal in the most fundamental sense. Right. And again, 0.999 repeating doesn't equal 1 in the most fundamental sense. Why am I saying that? Why is that coming out of my mouth?
I was talking about the asymptotic, right? Like
right. Yes. And then what happens? I dropped into that Mandelbrot thing where it's like, well, that's actually really neat, because in the Mandelbrot thing, you get a really good first-person experience of what it means to actually zoom in, to get closer and closer, but to like notice that there's no getting close. There's no end. Right? And it's not that the no end has to do with like I'm subdividing and subdividing and subdividing, but rather more like that's even really a thing in this space. It's a different kind of thing, like a fluxion of change. Oh, I can't really. This is new to me. And this is something that's beyond my current capacity. I can't really play here well. I just am noticing it. So let me just notice it.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Let's notice it. So just right there, we're now in a, like you just acknowledged, noticing, becoming aware of something that we're now in territory, we're moving into territory that you haven't played in before.
Yeah.
What is it that you are related to that? In what way is that new territory present? Even though we haven't played in it before, or you know that we're not there or we're at the edge of it.
Yeah, it feels like love. Like it feels like when I'm standing in the room, let's say I'm standing in the room, I'm doing something, and Vanessa walks in and she's looking at me, and I don't notice it, but I feel a palpability to the quality of love. You know?
Yeah.
Or the other direction, you know, if you do this with your wife, or even I think for me even more easily with a child, like there's that point at which like you're watching your child, and for some reason and by the way, the more of this, the better, I would propose. But you find yourself like just feeling the incredible beauty of the moment, just the infinite value of that. The infinite. I mean, let me put it: the infinite value of the moment, right? The presencing of love.
It's like that. It's just I'm. My wife Brienne is just entered her second trimester, and just a couple days ago,
we're supposed to have a chat about that.
I was just the other day. I told her I wanted to catch it. I was hoping we'd catch it at the same time, the first time you feel them. And she's like, I think I feel them. And I run in there and I put my ear up against her belly, and we were just listening. And I was like, okay, the pulse is okay. And we started to identify it. And the moment I could feel it move, that's going to be. That just happened a couple of days ago.
It's a real thing. The reason I think for the connection, and it's funny, I was reflecting on this just yesterday, is that it is a very rare thing to be an old man and to really choose, right? Not to, to find yourself in the midst of a midlife crisis and have a sweet young thing who wants to have a kid and just sort of do that. But to actually like, no, I'm going to go through the crucible of parenting now with the full force of my consciousness and my humility and my integrity, and recognizing exactly how much that's going to put me through. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? By the way, I had a really, really, from my point of view, like a really felt wonderful conversation on this thing called Clubhouse, which normally I just avoid, but I was invited into it and I felt like there was a beautiful invitation. So I was there and we talked about parenting, which is the first time.
John and I did a conversation on that recently, a couple of weeks ago.
On Clubhouse.
Yeah.
So there's a SoundCloud of that conversation. Denny, who did it, recorded it, and it's an hour and 45 minutes. But I think it's the best thing I've ever done. Like I feel the most like wow, I really feel good about having done that at the highest level. So maybe not the best thing I've ever done, but the one that I feel the most glad to have done is maybe exactly the right way.
It plucks that no string.
Yeah, it plucks that no string. Yeah, I would. That's actually exactly it. And so, I'd be happy to share it with you. I don't have permission and to share it broadly, but I can share it with you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And by the way, much respect for making that choice.
Thank you.
Blessings on you and your family in these times in particular.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Received.
And I trust that in the days and months and years to come, you will find yourself over and over again reawakened to the presence of love.
Yeah. It's about the best thing. That's about the best trust I've received.
Yeah, and to rewind a little bit, the thing that I feel when I feel that is a combination of it's like a flavor of protective care and honor. Maybe that's even a better word. Honor this, like literally honor this. This is here now. The right mode first. Honor it. Move slowly. Be careful. Walking out of the baby's room so you don't wake her up at night. Be careful. Treating the heart of the woman who's given you her heart, and in this case also her body, with the exquisite care, right? The immaculate care that both it deserves and it needs. And that's the thing that is called up in me immediately thereafter, right? When noticing that's the next thing that's called up in me. I truly notice it, which sadly many times I don't.
Right. I really appreciated what you said about, as an old man, making such a choice, right? Is yes. And I have to say, it's interesting what when I chose it. If we could say, I don't even know if I can say I chose it. It was more like I was trying to choose it. We've been together for a long time. She didn't have any desire to have kids, really didn't talk. And then all of a sudden she starts talking about it, right? And I'm like, I've already had a child. I'm going to be like, at this point, 45. Now I'm 48. And so I tried to figure that one out. And I could not come up with a rationale to have a kid or even not have a kid. It's like, but
because that's the wrong mode.
Oh, it's totally the wrong mode. And it was so interesting because there was a moment where her sister had just had a baby, and she had just come back from spending time with the baby. And there was this moment where I saw just the little bud, right, of something in her that it was beautiful. And I got really clear, like that moment, that shine forth, that little bud. It was all at one moment. So it wasn't even like a thought. It was just a clarity that will only blossom if she has a child and she's a mother. And I was like, all right, there. That's what I was like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, my experience was very similar in the sense that Vanessa had been married and had never had any desire to have a child, and even had created narratives about how she would be a bad mom or whatever, right? And we were together for a pretty good long time, and she began to feel like, okay, I need to come to a conclusion on this.
Mm-hmm.
My body is going to make a decision for me. Let me see if I can own that decision, like really be at peace with what comes.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I went on my journey, as you say. I've got an
Mm-hmm.
18-year-old and a 16-year-old. I have, one, I've been through this, and two, I know what that means.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going in eyes, we call it with rose-colored glasses. Like this is a hard gig.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I remember is the particular moment where I was almost like embodying myself in the future along both timelines. Like really trying to be me with another child and me without another child. And like feeling, okay, what's the pain? What's the change? Who is this new person? What did you go through? What's the joy? What's the grief of all that? And both, right? Because that's the thing that you say, both paths have joy and grief.
Yeah.
Both paths are they're singular paths. There's nothing about them. They're not commensurable. You cannot compare them. You cannot calculate them. You cannot do a utilitarian calculus. Like that's nonsense because it's literally the wrong mode.
Yeah.
And then just feeling it and feeling it and feeling it. And then finally getting to a place of actually noticing what I would just call clarity. Which in my life, I have had enough failures to notice when I feel at peace with come what may. This is something that I can go through and that I can feel like I will be at peace come what may. And I noticed that I had peace on both paths. And so I was able to go to her and say, I can commit to fully supporting you, whichever path you choose. This is your choice. And I don't mean like it's your, I'm checking out. I really mean, this is your choice. And it's always going to be your choice. Will always have been your choice. And what I can tell you is I can with complete confidence commit to fully supporting you, whichever path you take. And then she went through like a whole year of deep, deep work in lots of different ways to be able to come to a place where she was able to say, okay, I am fully yes. And by the way, now it's in God's hands because there's still biology.
Yes. Totally.
But lo and behold, so it came to pass. So
how long ago was that? How long ago was that?
Well, do the math. So Eloise is 20. She'll be 27 months in March.
Okay,
so
got it.
27 plus 9.
Wow. So 27 months later. But if you check in with that past self, right, and you look at the one that you are here.
Good call. Yeah, good call. This is the upside of having gone through the transformational process is that unknown.
Yeah.
Now, for example, one of the things that I didn't have, I didn't even have trepidation around, just a little bit, was okay, well, how are my other kids going to respond? And we involved them in the conversation. It wasn't just oh, by the way, but they don't know. I don't know. And it was amazing is that way that the reality expanded. That like my older daughter, and this is the point is what I'm going to say is that this is a quality or an aspect of herself that I had never seen before and didn't even think was part of herself. Okay. So one day she walks up, she picks up a baby of, 2 months with hair, a baby who's maybe a little fussy, a little fidgety, a little crying, not easy, not beautiful, like carries her into the other room and just takes care of her for like an hour. In herself, just naturally felt that level of care and quality and love for not a, fun time, but for actually what would be fun from the point of view from her. My point is that it wasn't like a video game, it wasn't games. It was real. And I was just like, holy cow. Yeah. How beautiful that aspect of her would never have been opened or would not have been seen until perhaps maybe she had her own child or, some of her peers did. Because, of course, we live in this crazy psychotic civilization where natural human relationships are radically interrupted by these bizarre constructs. And we take kids and cohort them. So they're only relating with people who are their own age. and separate them from context where they may have relationships across that matrix.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, 16-year-old girls actually really benefit from being in a relationship with babies. There's something there that's part of humanness that is well met and enriched.
Right.
And of course, now she's in a place where her ability to be in a relationship with the possibility of her own motherhood is just vastly more, like, she actually doesn't have the complete mystery of how do I show up? How do you deal with these kinds of relationships? Oh, I've actually done them in a way that was a lot easier, like a lot less all at once.
Yeah.
which hopefully will show up as actually being able to show up more fully.
Yeah. Yes.
Hopefully will show up as her being able to support the sacredness of that relationship completely, right?
Totally.
It gets passed down.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. The unknown unknown.
The unknown unknown and the joyful unknown unknown.
So this actually, tying this back in, right, just to all this, mentioning.
By the way.
Oh, you gotta go.
5 more minutes?
What's that?
5 more minutes?
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Good to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you too.
Really good to see you. Yeah, totally. Apology received. And not necessary. You in a conversation that you uploaded not that long ago, this actually kind of maybe points to both. What is that over there? Right? Well, it's like the way when my wife walks in, I don't see her yet, but I can feel her. That thing that we're in new territory. And another way to say that is in some sense it's concealed, right? It's not apparent. That territory isn't apparent. It's just known. You don't see it. There's a way it's concealed, but it's also, there's a way that it's revealed.
Which conversation?
Oh, when you were talking about, like, okay, I'm now officially in new territory, right? Like, well, a territory I haven't played much in, right?
Oh, just now.
Yeah. Just now. Yeah, just now. That was referencing that. So in reference to all that, you had said in another video, you just mentioned with somebody, I think it was an anthropologist you were talking to or something, where you said, I have a lot of one-on-one conversations, and half of them are with women and men. And I always want to upload the conversation. It seems valuable. And you just mentioned that, I think you said all the women say no to putting it out.
With one exception now, Nora Bateson has said yes, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I should say, there's one other woman who's also said yes, but we haven't had a conversation.
Okay, got you.
And I don't. It's funny. I'd like to. I'm not endeavoring to shame or provoke anything. In fact,
absolutely. In fact, it's the opposite. That's the thing I got from it. I'm like, what is, like, there's an intelligibility. There's something they have their eye on and are deeply related to, right? That I'm like, what is that? Right? What is that sensibility? And I feel somehow that lurking, something about, like, whatever that relationship, to the way in which that I haven't played in that territory yet, it's present in some way, right? But it's silent by it's not speaking to us. We're not playing it. It's nothing we can point to yet. There's an understanding of it being there, right? It's present like this. And this choice, this interesting choice, this inclination to, no, let's not, I don't want to put it up on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of really beautiful things I think that happen in that. So, by the way, thank you for bringing that up. It's not been in my mind, but I think there's a lot of beautiful things to be found there. So I'll just put one out that is just fun for me. And this is one of the ways that I, I don't call it, like, create space for certain kinds of things. Remember that whole part about the universe is vast and we don't really understand what's up?
Yeah.
I don't know how things work with such certainty that I'm going to try to force things to be the way that I want them to be. For example, while yes, if we choose to, we did choose to record this. And so while yes, if we choose to share it, through ordinary linear audiovisual means. People who choose to play and keep having their eye holes open, their ears holes open, will have some experience of this phenomenon. Right? Yes, very linear, very concrete, very engineering. I get you. It may very well be the case that if we did not record it, we did not share it, there may be other modes through which that sharing happens. I don't know. Maybe those modes are the proper modes. Happen in a more sacred relationship of deep, deep care for the things that are too subtle to be conveyed in photons and tone of voice, mangled by TCP/IP packets, is in fact perfectly the artful relationship to what is being shared in that moment. And by God, yes, I would not tread upon that for anything. So my orientation to it is, listen to your discernment. Listen to the aspect of yourself that you trust most to make the most meaningful choices. And if it says, don't record this, or if it says record it and don't share it, the answer is yes. Because in that mystery, we don't know. That's one story. Right? That's one way of looking at it. Which makes it very easy for me to just say yes. Like I'm there to make space. I don't have any agenda.
Right.
Well, I have an agenda. My agenda is very explicit. I'm here to try to do what I can to support the sacred relationship with the sacred embodying itself in the world, or something like that, or war with entropy, if you like that turn of phrase. Another story, which I think is quite nice, is to say, look, there's something that just cannot help but happen when you have at least a little bit of a background awareness of the notion that somebody might be watching, right? It's pretty simple. Right? Imagine you're making love with your wife, and then you suddenly have the idea in your head that somebody's peeping Tom is watching through the window.
Completely different.
Something changes, right? It doesn't matter, right? You could be super comfortable, like I'm all good, man, but nothing, that doesn't matter. Something changes, like a little bit. And that's happening now, right? Now, I am, I guess you might call it shameless enough or surrendered enough or whatever to be willing to put myself pretty far out there in these recorded conversations. But I'm still not the same as who I am in a private conversation, because some part of me, some part of my ego mind isn't out there trying to figure out how to manipulate and modulate and hold back, right? It's still happening. And it's happening, right? It leaves a trace. It creates a ripple. It creates an effect. And that effect is part of what's propagated, right? So there's actually a profanity that is intrinsic in what's up. That's that too. So in that case, I speak to these people who, by the way, not all men say yes. That's important. It's not a male-female divide per se. To say, okay, I deeply honor your care in this question. I should also say, by the way, and I really hope this comes to pass. I don't always say yes to conversations where the ability to record it isn't going to happen, because I have very little time and very little energy. And if a question comes up, if somebody says, here's a question I'd like to ask, I'm like, well, this is a really good question, but it's kind of a question that I'm going to need to share. Because if I'm going to put the time and energy into figuring out how to articulate it in language, it needs to be shared. So either we share it or you take responsibility for sharing it really well. Like that's what's going to have to happen. And on occasion, the answer is, I don't feel comfortable with that. And therefore my response is going to be, okay, well, then I'm not going to be able to attend to that now. Maybe at some point in the future, that'll be ripe and ready. Or maybe I'll just express the answer in some other way and you'll get the answer you want. Right. But I had this experience yesterday. So I'm really hopeful on this one. And I hope I'm not hexing it by saying it. A person who I believe is a woman, a young woman in, her name indicates that she's not of my particular ethnicity, but I don't actually know which one, maybe Dutch, German, or maybe even further afield. It's kind of an interesting name. And I'm pretty sure it's also a woman, but I'm not quite sure. Asked some questions. I said, those are great questions, but these are questions of that sort. Sorry, I need to record it. And she said, not comfortable with that. I said, okay. And she reached out to me after this conversation I just recently uploaded yesterday or 2 days ago. A conversation with Brandon Hayes. It was pretty intense, a very intense conversation. She said, I am now comfortable recording our conversation, which in context, like for me, very powerful. Like, okay, wow. And by the way, now my level of honor for what needs to be held in this space just went through the roof. So I was like, well, Fortunately and unfortunately, I'm deeply honored by your saying that, and I can tell that I'm not ready. So I'm going to need to go to some more breathing and deep, drinking of and healing, so that I can actually come with the level of integrity necessary to hold what I hope can show up in the conversation.
Right.
All right, man.
So good to talk with you, as always. Thank you, my friend.
Much love to your partner.
I will.
And to your little one.
Absolutely.
Send some vibes my way.
I'll put an email out for the band to get back together again.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bye.
Big yes. Bye.